of Construction Ask Me Anything event here. My name's Keith Molenaar. I'm a NAC member and a professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. The National Academy of Construction was established to recognize our industry leaders. An important purpose of the Academy is to provide a network, a system of linkage between the past and present participants in the construction industry. As such, we've established this Ask Me Anything to help transfer knowledge to our next generation of construction leaders, and that's you with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. The format for the AMA is simple. Our speakers make a short presentation on a topic and their perspective in the industry, and you'll get a chance to ask them questions. So if you have not already, please do email your questions to NACAMA, all one string of letters there, NACAMA@colorado.edu. Spell out colorado.edu. I'll ask questions from what you've submitted, and at the end, one of our participants will win a $500 scholarship, and I'll announce that at the end. So please do send in your questions so that you'll be eligible for the scholarship. So let's jump in. I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Bill Calhoun, and if you give me a moment, I'm going to put up some of his slides here, or some pictures from some of his slides. So give me a moment just to share my screen. And then, Bill, can you confirm, can you see my screen there?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Well, Bill Calhoun is Executive Vice President and Vice Chairman of the Clark Construction Group in Bethesda, Maryland. He holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Georgia Tech, Ramblin' Wreck there. And he's also completed the advanced management program at Harvard Business School. At Clark, he's responsible for driving the company's strategic direction, including the acquisition of new work and the identifying new work in emerging markets. He began his career in Clark in 1983 and has over 3 decades of industry experience. He's provided leaderships on numerous award-winning projects, many of which you can see scroll by here, including the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency New Campus East, the Brooke Army Medical Center, the Capital One Arena, the U.S. Coast Guard headquarters, the new terminal at Kansas City International Airport, and Washington State Convention Center, Center Edition. So just to name a few. Bill does a lot of service. He's a member of the External Advisory Board at Georgia Tech's College of Engineering. He serves as a national peer reviewer in the GSA Construction Excellence Peer Review Program, and he served on the board of directors for the Construction Industry Roundtable. Bill is the Glenn L. Martin Medal recipient from the James A. Clark School of Engineering at the University of Maryland, and has been inducted into the Georgia Institute of Technology's College of Engineering Academy of Distinguished Engineering Alumni. And he's also a National Academy of Construction member for his lifetime achievements as well. And so, Bill, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I'm going to give you a few minutes to kind of provide your perspectives, and then we'll go ahead and jump into questions.
Great. Well, thanks very much, Keith. And before we get started, I want to let you know that we're stuck on the second frame. So I don't know if you can get that to, there we go. It's strolling, but thanks. It's great to be with everyone here tonight. It's a little bit unusual in that I like to be able to look at the faces of the people I'm speaking with, but I guess I'll look into the camera and pretend I see somebody there. But it's great to be with you all tonight and have an opportunity to share some thoughts and take some questions and take this discussion where the questions want to lead us with regard to complex projects. I want to speak for just a minute about my perspective, which comes out of most of my career from Clark. And Clark is I graduated in '81 with civil engineering and worked for another national general contractor for a couple of years, and I started with Clark in '83. So I've been there 38 years and been around the country and served in a number of roles, starting with the very entry-level project engineer, and worked at many different cities around the country, and before moving back and taking a more corporate role and growing in the corporate world, so to speak. But my perspective is one from Clark, where we are about a $5.5 to $6 billion national general contractor that still self-performs in some of the key markets. We do about 70 to 75% of our work in the building world, and the 20 to 25% of our work is in the heavy civil roads, tunnels type of work. So we do have perspective. I do have perspective of both kinds of work. I would say that I'm going to express a few overall thoughts about large, complex building work that I think are universal. And over the years, my work with GSA as a national peer, my work with our own company, seeing large projects go really well and projects not go really well. And I've boiled down the first set of things I generally look for, which are not super technical. There's a lot of technical things in our world that we've got to pay attention to, but I start by looking at 3 or 4 things at any project. And we have to start any project we do with a good set of documents. And did the agency, the owner, the developer, the municipality, did they produce a set of documents that really reflect what they want to do? And are they clear, or are they riddled with issues and problems that we'll know that we have a good chance of having disputes and issues right from the get-go. So we need to start any job we do with a good set of documents. Second thing, and probably the most important thing, it's got 2 or 3 subsets to it, is we need in our business decision makers. And I look for, in our company, when we're going to run a large complex project, we have to put a decision maker on the project. The owner has to put a decision maker on the process, and the designer has to have a decision maker that is involved in it also. And when I say a decision maker, I look really for 3 things in that decision maker. They have to have the experience, and which brings the knowledge base to make decisions on complex projects. Otherwise, we get into what we've all heard, paralysis by analysis. And time is so important in our business to be able to continue to move forward when the clock is running, the contract clock is running with both what we do and the subcontractor. So we've got to have a decision maker that understands as the knowledge base to make decisions. They have to have the authority. In the government world, that's a warrant. So they have to have the dollar authority to make the decisions they're tasked to make, to keep the project moving forward, to resolve issues as the conflict as it comes up. And then they have to have the attitude, the willingness, the desire. They have to see the need that to make decisions and resolve issues, which sometimes are tough because they involve time and or money. And those decisions can get delayed and postponed. So we need someone who has the desire and sees the positive aspect of making tough decisions timely so that we can move on and focus on the path ahead as opposed to how we're going to solve problems later. And so we get that kind of decision making as my second item. And then maybe the third and the fourth item, a little less significant, but I see in a lot of big complex jobs, the ability of the user, the space user, the tenant, if it's a hospital, it's doctors, whatever the occupant is, to come in late. These complex projects typically are designed for several years, and then it takes 2 to 3 years to build them. So by the time the occupant sees them, the technology has changed, their desires changed, the people have changed. So we may be 3, 4, 5 years after the design was done, and now we start making changes in the later stage of the job before we're trying to turn it over. And those changes often can be small in dollar value, but very disruptive. And then the time cost. We may do $500,000 of changes and take 6 months to do it. And the time cost with the subs could be $20, $30 million. And so that often leads to big problems and disputes. So start with good, better documents, focus on how do we get better documents, get the right decision making at the table, try to reduce the impact of late changes. And then probably the fourth thing, and it's a big bucket, I'm not going to get into all the detail, but there has to be a fair and kind of mutual understanding of the risks in the deal. The risks change with regard to the contract type, the facility type, and when you go at risk. But you really want to try to align incentives or align interests to the best degree you can among the contracting parties. And there needs to be a clear understanding of who's got which risks so that we can make decisions within that perspective. So those are kind of governing thoughts with what I see when a project goes poorly that we haven't paid attention to those things. And most often it falls into the decision makers on the project. They get blinded and stymied and can't make decisions and solve problems. And so smaller problems turn into mountains that are going to get solved later, and then attitudes go bad. And so the reverse of that is when decisions are made timely, everybody gives a little bit and the project moves on. So with that, Keith, I can unfortunately talk forever about these things, but I'd love to hear some questions, and we can maybe get into a little bit more of those themes if we need to in the Q&A.
I really appreciate the themes on complex projects and your experience, and also very much enjoyed looking at the pictures of those complex projects you've worked on. There's a lot you've left behind there in your career. So thanks for that.
Sure.
Let's jump in with let's see, Jose and Sadra are asking a similar question here, so I'll kind of combine them. Just pretty straightforward. What do you enjoy most about the construction industry, or what do you like most about your job?
I would say what I like most, probably two things come to mind right off the top. One is people. As I've gotten older, I really have had an opportunity to reflect on all the great people, smart people, innovative people all over the United States in all different walks of life and different disciplines, from the design community, the development community, subcontractors. There's brilliance in people all over, and people really do, for the most part, want to do a really good job. And I've gotten a chance to know really great people and learn a lot from a lot of people. And I think I've always had that attitude that everybody in this business they're smart people, they're driven, they want to do a good job, and there's a lot to be learned from people. And so I really enjoy the people. I've made great friends. And I think, there's a theme in how I've conducted myself buried in that comment. And I think that, I have kind of five core principles on leadership that I fall back to kind of define how I think about work. And one of them is relationships. This is a relationship business. And so I've really enjoyed that aspect of the business over the years. I think the second thing that immediately comes to mind for me is something I think defines all of us that have an interest in the built world. There's something about seeing something tangible about what we spend our life's work doing. And when I can look around and feel like in some way I was part of that project, whatever the project is, and know that, there was a concert and I was part of that concert that created that edifice. And many, many of these buildings, they do things that matter. They enable people to do things that matter for society. And so I take great pride in what we've created as a society, how we move society forward. And I could tell you stories on many of those buildings that were on the screen, and many hurdles and issues along the way that collaboration brought great solutions, and we've got great finished product and pleased clients. So there's a lot of satisfaction in that beyond the dollars that you earn doing it.
Yeah, thank you. Those are great comments. I know what got me into construction was working for my father's business and seeing what you've created and watching that go up is pretty incredible. And I appreciate your comments on the team as well. You talked a little bit about a couple of your core principles around leadership. Megan was asking, she's an engineer, and what should she be working on in order to be an effective leader? How can one learn those leadership skills?
Well, I think it gets back to treating people right. And I was going to maybe sum up my comments tonight with my core principles, but I'm happy to touch on what they are. And I might even say that I did a talk on this at my alma mater a few years ago to try to say what really mattered to me as I thought about what drove me. And, I think I start with always doing the right thing. And I think safety trumps all else in that conversation. But regardless of where you are on the knowledge scale as a leader, you be humble and know what you don't know. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable to be an effective leader. And so I think, but always be governed by doing the right thing. And whether you're the most knowledgeable on a given topic or a given facility type, but you're the leader, you know what the right thing is. We know what the right thing is in our heart, and we always do the right thing. And don't ever question yourself on that. I think another governing thought that drives me and is good to see in people, and is frankly absent so much in a lot of the government world that I see, is assume a position of accountability. As a leader, give the credit to your team. You're as a leader, you should be judged by, did you help make your team or enable or empower your team to be successful, and give them the credit, but you be accountable. Assume a position of accountability. And I often ask myself the question, what did I do or not do to make that happen or not happen if I didn't get the result that I wanted or tried for? And we all know we can't control everything, but I think if you assume accountability and then be reflective on the outcome, you learn. And I think others around you appreciate that. And I think it breeds that kind of a concept. And I think when people are accountable, and they all hold themselves accountable, you get a more effective and high-performing team. I think I mentioned a minute ago the third thing, which is relationships. I think people and relationships underscore everything we do. And we can be the smartest, hardest working person in the room, but if we don't have a team and we don't empower the team, and the team doesn't want to work or collaborate, we're an army of one. And so I'd take a team of B players and bring them to work together in concert, rather than being an A player myself. I'll beat every A player there is with a team of great B players that I can lead and help achieve. I think this is one that I often talk about, which is know the business behind your business and behind your client's business. It's one thing to understand to be a construction leader and to know how to put the schedule together, or to know, how to put an estimate together, or whatever the individual aspects. But how does your business make money? How does your client's business make money? What risk can they take? How can you bring services of high value to your client that are, if not super costly to you? So how can you align what you do in a way that it really delivers value to your client? So you have to know the business behind the business. And then the last thing I think I try to think about is to be social, give back, get involved, give back to others, things like this event, help out with philanthropic things, mentor others around you. Some of the things you mentioned, Keith, the GSA peer review, which I hope has brought some help to some teams when I see things, since I'm not biased by being there every day, but I can see something maybe clearer to me when I come in on occasion and say, this looks like it's a seed of an issue, or you're doing something really well over here. Celebrate it and do more of it. In a way, and I don't do it for this, but there's a takeaway for me. It validates my own thinking from what I've seen in my own company. And I am actually learning by being exposed. As I give back, I'm helping, but I'm learning at the same time. So I think it's important for all of us to take time as we go to help others as we go through the process.
Well, yeah, thank you, Bill. And Megan, I hope those are some good things for you to practice as you build your leadership skills. They certainly seem like excellent advice. Bill, you talked a little bit about the GSA peer review process, and a lot of that's done to try and avoid conflict. Julio had a question just specifically about how you manage conflict, and he asks one question, is it true that the customer is always right? So be curious as to your thoughts on just managing conflict and if the customer is always right.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I do start from a perspective of we have to. Yes, I don't know that I'd say the client's always right. The way I would put that is we have to put ourselves in a position of always making decisions in the best interest of the project. The project is the client's project. I think with conflict, I run right at it, and I tell people to run right at it, and that's not human nature. if it's we that may have screwed something up or done something that is a problem, or we discover there's an error in the drawings, or a decision wasn't made by the owner, or there's something going to cost money, it's a different site condition, it's going to be conflict. The worst thing we can do is not to put it on the table and all look at it and talk about it. We can't just talk about it. We have to have a perspective of solutions in mind and be able to talk about it with the project's best interest. And some of these complex projects, the problems are complex and there's no easy, here's the right answer. So when you talk about the project and or the problem, you talk about the levers of impact. A less costly solution may be more timely. A less costly solution may impact other elements of the work, or may be a problem for other reasons. So try to understand to the best you can the levers of influence or impact with a complex problem, but run right at it, and don't be afraid to state what we know and what we don't know. I have found that that if you wait for weeks till you know all there is to know about a problem, and then you put it on the table to deal with, it's much less effective, and it becomes a bigger conflict than if you, right from the get-go, you try to get to the heart of the problem with the owner and those that are involved. Sorry about it, I got something ringing here in the background. But to try to start the solution process right away. I think you always have to be honest. You have to develop trust. And you have to expect that of other people as well. And I think these core principles of do the right thing and assume a position of accountability, I think owners get to know that. And I think they respect that when you're trying to resolve complex issues. So run right at the problem. It's not always the easy thing. It's not human nature. No one wants to deliver bad news. But bad news, as the expression says, it doesn't age like fine wine. It ages like milk, right? It gets sour and worse.
Thank you for those thoughts. I really appreciate it. Let's see, our theme is this fall is complex projects and managing complex projects. Sandra asks, how do you specifically identify a project as a mega project? And do they always hold more risk for you?
That's again a very interesting question, and I don't know that there's any real agreement talking with my peers and in the general construction field what makes a large complex project or a mega project, and I think that it really is different in the eyes of whomever you may be talking to. To me, if I go back when I started and we had a $50 million job, that was a very large complex project, and somehow we went from $50 million projects were everyday normal projects to now it has to be 500 million to be a large complex project. So I don't know what happened between 50 and 500. We just took one giant leap. But generally speaking, and it's general, I would say when you get in the $400 to $500 million range, we at Clark start to think that's a large project. I think what though influences the thinking is the risk. Okay, and we really have to understand the risk of these jobs, because when you get to a project that's a $500 million project, if it doesn't have the right risk allocation, it can have bet your company kind of risk. And I think that's a very, very important thing for all of us to focus on, to understand that risk. And another kind of axiom we live by, and I preach, is we don't bet the farm on any one project. And what goes along with that is there is no one project we have to have. So if the risk isn't right and it's not things that we can control or manage or cap or share interests on, then it doesn't seem to be a deal that we want. But the complexity is born out of many other things. Is it design build? Is it a simple office building where the performance of the design is you have to produce square feet for an office function? Or is it a data center, a mission critical that has to perform with a certain level of efficiency with electrical and cooling? Or is it a more complex environment that we're doing in design build? We do a lot of public-private partnerships where, and everyone is different, but there are all kinds of different risks in a public-private partnership. Third-party risks, historical risks, utility provider risks, railroad risks, financing risks. And so all of those kinds of risks and how do they play into the contract also determine whether or not it's a large complex project. We could have a much smaller dollar value, but if you have financial partners, space users, an equity fund, you have debt players, which are often banks, you have a design, whether the design is yours or it's a different party taking the design liability, all those things play into the complexity. But if you wanted to say just in general, I would say somewhere around $500 million starts to be a special project for us.
Well, thanks. You talked a lot about risk. Scott has asked a question: how do you make sure that the risks are given to the stakeholders in a way that can ensure a collaborative environment?
Well, that is a really great question, because as I've thought about big projects that have gone really well, and I wrote the white paper as an insight for the NAC on the NGA, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And that was a project that we were able to share risk all around the table. The occupant, NGA, it was a space user, had significant risk around the goal of getting in for a budget and on a specific time frame. The Corps of Engineers, the contract agent that we had our contract with, had some very serious risk on budget, on time. We obviously had set a target price, which if the eventual redetermined cost went over the target price, we had some very serious risk in giving back fee and then eventually paying for everything over a ceiling price. And then the designer had some very serious risk. If the redesign had to happen after we started at 20%, if the design was creeping and causing cost creep, then they would have to redesign on their nickel. So we all had risk in that situation. The question is, how do I insure it? And I can't insure it. I look at that on every job, and I look to make sure that those risks are not one-sided. And I will tell you, there are deals that we walk away from regularly where all the risk seems to be placed in the pot of the contractor or the design builder. And if those risks are not capped with the form of whether it's liquidated damages with a cap on schedule, or there's not some other risk mitigation methods, and there are many to talk about, then if it's all one-sided, then we generally will walk away from that under the guise of there's no one deal we have to have. I think when you take work as a design builder, the risk of the design performing has to be looked at, and the design firms typically carry professional liability, errors, and omissions. They have to be skilled in the kind of work that you're going to be doing, and they have to understand that they carry that risk, ultimately performance of the design. And also they have to understand the schedule. So I think that maybe the fundamental basis is we have to really spend the time with all the parties to the contract up front in a very collaborative type of atmosphere to discuss these things before we all take the risk. If it's a lump sum bid build job and it's a large complex project with all kinds of ambiguity around these risks, we're going to seek clarification before we bid the job. And if we can't get satisfactory clarification on the ambiguity, we're probably not going to go after the job because we don't want bad work, and we certainly don't want work where we're going to lose a lot of money on.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience there. Great advice. Let me ask you, Rachel, just kind of keeping along this stakeholder involvement. She's asking, regarding a one-team atmosphere, how do you go about developing trust and commitment within the team?
That's a critical component. And I think I do what comes naturally to me, and we expect and work at this with all of our job leadership. And I think it starts, not to use the overused word partnering, but I think we need to start our projects with the stakeholders at the table. And the stakeholders are not only the owner and the owner's designer or my designer, but it's the building occupant or our owner or our client's client. And we have to start by understanding what are the expectations, what are the communications expectations, what are the performance expectations of each of those parties, including us. That's very important for the contractor to express what they need to succeed to accomplish the goals of the owner and the client and the designer. And I think you start with that fundamental understanding and take the time to do that. And then I think it's critical to measure the performance in an honest way on a regular basis, quarterly or some regular pace, where we can each, in a frank way, talk about, without emotion, without condemning others, but say, this is what's working well amongst the group. This is what's not working well. And we need to each say, we have to solve this. It's not your problem or my problem. It's our problem. It's in the project's best interest. And I think if we conduct ourselves that way, and we are the leader in that process, there are oftentimes third parties doing partnering. We prefer to do it with our own internal group. But I think if you run right at those issues and you're open and honest and you listen and you communicate, I think honesty breeds that trust that I'm talking about. And I think when that trust starts to erode, I think that's when you ring the bell. And I think you've got to get principal level people, whether it's owners of companies or principal level decision makers, to the table to discuss these issues so that they don't fester.
Oh, thanks. Well, excellent answer. Let me ask one final question on risk, and then we're going to change themes here a little bit. But Jay was asking, how do you actually assess risk? When you're talking about this as teams or yourself as a company, what's your process for making those risk assessments?
Again, an insightful question. A couple different levels. I think from a pure contractual point of view, we have internally a list of, we call them deal breakers. Sometimes we call them deadly sins, and they're things that are risks contractually that we won't take. It would be something like exposure to consequential damages, uncapped consequential damages for economic loss. I have no way to monetize that. If I'm a week late, could I incur a $20 million consequential damages claim from an owner? And so we go through a list of these deadly sins and see where the contract is on that. And if they exist in an unfair and unreasonable way, we attempt to sit down and talk with the owner and mitigate those to an acceptable level. I think the next level of risks might be in how we price the job, cost risk, and if there are good documents that are construction documents produced by the owner, then we can estimate the work, then it's low risk, but we'll go on historical analysis and say we need a certain level of contingency. If it's a design build job where we are the designer and we only have a 10, 12-week period of time to put an estimate on a job, which is just a cartoon, then we're going to have more contingency, and we're going to seek clarity on, will the owner accept this structural system, or will the owner accept this product? And if we get that kind of feedback, then we can adjust the contingency we might need. I think the other bucket of risk that gets very, very difficult is third-party risk. Who's got the risk if we design a project with a partner to comply with code, and then a fire marshal comes out and just starts saying that on a very ambiguous interpretational type item that this design doesn't meet code? Who has that risk of time and cost? And so we talk about those things, and depending upon the outcome of the discussion with the owner, we'll monetize it. If I have the first 30 days or 60 days, I'll put the money in there for that in contingency. But we try to either, if we can't monetize it and control it, then we're not going to take it. And if we can't come to that agreement, then we generally will fade away from the job. We do rely on historical data for different types of construction, different areas, to inform us with how to monetize some of these risks. I'm not sure I really answered the question. I'm not sure there's an easy answer, but it's a great question. And if I had a really great answer, we'd probably be making a lot more money.
Well, great. It was a really good question. I know it's complex, so thanks for that summary. I really appreciated the answer. Let's see, Kenneth asked a question. Some of these large complex projects require joint ventures. So how do you choose to do a joint venture? How do you select your partner?
Yeah, that's something that is near and dear to my heart. For many years with Clark, all joint venture discussions have come through me for discussion. And I think there are a few companies, there's kind of two kinds of joint ventures, I would say. One is for a very large project. If we're doing $1 billion or $1.5 billion project, our sureties, who provide third-party guarantees on public work, they often want us to have a joint venture partner so that they actually have two balance sheets to go after if there's a default. And they determine that we pretty much set the standard that if you get over $1 billion, they'd like to see a joint venture. We go about looking at the culture of the company, and we get to know the principals. I get to know the CEO or chairman or some very top level relationship, and a few of us get to know the principles of the company and get to know the culture of the company, and we talk about that in advance. We typically are not going to create a brand new relationship at the day of the documents or a week before documents come out to bid. If it's not a company we know and we feel comfortable with, we understand their culture, we know what they've done, we visited, we've gotten to know them socially as well as professionally, then we're not going to joint venture with them. So we have to get very comfortable that there's a fit, there's a joint belief and understanding that we're taking care of our clients, we're going to do the right thing, we're going to operate at all times ethically and with integrity. All those kinds of, we treat subcontractors right, we treat owners right, we treat our people right. If there's not that congruence and comfort, then we won't do it. But if we have that kind of congruence, then really where I look is, does the bringing together these two companies offer some synergy? 1 and 1 is 3. They may have more people in the locale where the job is, or they may have more experience than we do with that owner, or they have the people, but we have the experience. We're looking for some of those things that would say 1 and 1 is 3. I've got to be able to look at an owner and tell them that your best choice is to pick us, and here's why. We've got to be able to answer that question. If we can't convince ourselves, then we're not going to convince an owner. So we've got to be able to answer that fundamental. I think the second reason to joint venture is really for local market knowledge. If it's a very parochial market, like many markets are, I can come in if I don't have an office there and have it built there. I don't get the right subcontractor pricing. I don't necessarily know the norms and the right building inspector to call and how certain subs work and don't work. And so we will, on those kinds of projects, look for a strong local player that will allow us to be in control of the joint venture, but that will provide the local talent and knowledge and participate with us. That's often a reason that we would, where you see we would come in as a much bigger player with a smaller local player for that local market knowledge. But those are the two reasons, really. It's the synergy to win the big job and to provide some ability to better perform the work, and or for that local capability that we might not have, that local experience, if you will.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. I appreciate you circling back to people and relationships there as well in those decisions. We're starting to run a little short on time here, believe it or not, but let me change directions a little bit. Looking to the future here, we have lots of questions around sustainability and then around technology as well. So Paul asked a question around sustainability. How do you see the green building movement going into the future?
It's a great topic, and it's exciting for all of us. I think the difficulty for us, and we're doing things and we're looking to differentiate with our capability, but I think it starts with remembering, largely as a contractor, as a general contractor, we don't make the market, we follow the market. We have to react to the market. The owners typically will set forward a set of plans and specifications that we have to bid on. And so for us to add issues of sustainability are limited in that area. We have to talk about our understanding and capabilities. In federal work, we often can talk about, our ideas to assist with whether it's a lead and how can we offer gold instead of silver if they specify silver, how can we get a job to platinum. I think if it's if there are other areas with the current is how can we participate in offering some voluntary solutions to reduce carbon footprint. We're looking at those kinds of things as a differentiator. But if they're not asked for and they're not part of the evaluation and they're not going to help us succeed, largely the market's not going to really push itself. We do because it is coming. I think where we're a design builder and we can offer a design solution in a competitive environment, but we can include sustainability issues with it and resiliency, then we do. Largely, it's the federal public market which is pushing us on resiliency and on sustainability. And so we're excited about that. The one other area I would say, which is probably the most interesting of this, is where we do public-private work in the vertical world, in the vertical infrastructure, social infrastructure world, where we come up with a solution, and I'm going to oversimplify it, but if the competition is on again, oversimplified, a net present value on a design, build, operate, maintain, finance, and that's all brought back to a present value. We've won projects where the first cost of the facility might be higher because I put more expensive mechanical systems in that will reduce energy consumption, as the example, over time. And if I have to borrow the money and operate and maintain it and have utility consumption risk, which we do in some jobs, if I'm going to save money on utility consumption because I've got a small chiller that on the nighttime cycle, operate that chiller at its peak efficiency curve, but the whole chiller is an extra cost to me, whereas I would have a lower first cost if I just have one big chiller, but I have to operate it way off its efficiency curve at night when there's no load. I can have a lower first cost, but a higher energy consumption cost. And if I can put the added chiller in the example in there to a higher first cost, and then I run the financial model where I could overcome a lot more than overcome that first cost with energy savings and bring it all back to a more competitive net present value. I think now we're driving real value into our proposal for the taxpayers. And I think that's going to, if the market grows, which I hope that it does, that's going to allow us to push more sustainability and green features into the competitive world and really get a lot of innovation going. So it's a fun subject. We've got a sustainability group. We're always looking for those clients that care, because when they care, that excites us to want to come up with innovative ideas. And that's often the mother of pushing ourselves, which we're constantly trying to do.
Excellent. Thank you for the comprehensive answer there. Excellent. Let me just pick one. We have so many questions. It's really exciting that our participants will be entering an industry with so much technology. There's questions on 3D printing, robotics, modularization. Let me just ask, let's see, Yiheng and Jamie are asking a question about BIM, building information modeling, and Revit, some of the more intelligent, drawings that are being put out there now. Can you speak a little bit about how Clark is using those technologies, benefiting from them, or where you think there's still area for growth?
Clearly a big area for growth. We are all about virtual design and construction and BIM and modeling and trying to pull together upfront and early to really figure out all the conflicts between the different specified systems and issues that occur building after building. It's not just class check with mechanical, electrical, and structural, but it's slab edge, coordinate it with the window system design. But the more we, and we now take the lead, we have a VDC, Virtual Design and Construction Group. We put all of the design docs in, all of the trade docs in, and really work to build that model such that we can not necessarily assure ourselves, but do a great deal at wringing out the conflict before we have the materials in the field. We are looking at methods through VDC to really plot out what we know and what we don't know, subgrade, because that's often the big area for conflict where the differing site conditions. What do we know about utilities and rock and water and hazmat that's in the ground? What do we definitely know? What do we think we know? And how will that potentially influence putting the foundations and excavation together? And so we're doing virtual design construction models of that to really be able to pinpoint here are the biggest risks, and here's where we should go pothole, or here's where we should drill cores to really figure it out. And so I see a lot of work forward there. I think as a generality, if you look at our industry, construction, and you look over the last 30 years, there's been very little productivity improvement. Some would argue, and I've seen some curves that say we've lost productivity over 30 years compared to manufacturing. But I think VDC modeling is really going to enable us to go forward and improve that condition. It's really going to be the basis to allow us to do more prefabrication and modular construction as well, which is two other related areas that we are working on right now as well. It's an exciting field, it really is, and I would encourage anybody who is interested in it. It's a technical skill that the more we have of it in our engineers and our project managers, the more they know how to use the result of that modeling to the benefit of the project, the better off we're going to be.
Well, yeah, it's an exciting time, and thanks. It's great to hear how you're embracing it. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time here. So I just want to say a couple thank yous, and then Bill, give it to you for a few closing words, and then we'll announce the winner of the scholarship. I just want to, let me, before you start though, I'd just like to say a personal note of gratitude, if you don't mind.
Certainly.
You know, I read your bio, and you're just so involved in service in so many areas, giving back to universities, giving back to your community, to the profession. When I was a brand new professor at Georgia Tech a little over 20 years ago, you were just so generous with your time and got me involved in the GSA peer review process and other things, and it just had a huge impact on my life. And just want to say thank you for taking that extra time to do those things you don't necessarily need to do in your day-to-day job, and let you know that they do have a big impact. So thank you, and just want to have you close it out with a few words.
Well, thank you, Keith. Thanks for expressing that. And it's a great industry, great people is where I started. I love what I do. We have tough days, but we accomplish a lot when we work together. And I think that's where this industry needs to continue to focus on collaboration and people and relationships, and try to keep the lawyers, no offense to anybody on the phone who's a lawyer, we need them, the world needs them, but to try to keep the lawyers and the fights and the conflict away, and realize that honest people can disagree, but it's how we handle those disagreements and how we approach them with trust and honesty, and make the tough decisions timely, and that's going to drive us. The other thing I would say is we are at a time in society, given a lot of it what's forced by the COVID environment, where we've got a lot of new issues that are upon us, and they're new challenges, and they're going to be challenges to all of you that are listening on the phone as we get out into the world. And just to touch on some of them, the COVID and pandemic type of impact, and what does that do to labor and productivity, and do owners just want you to take it versus not? That's just one issue. We're all aware of the supply chain impacts and the volatility in supply chain, and then I would say that's also driven subcontractor workforce, as well as subcontractor capacity issues. And I think the amount of construction that's going to continue to take place is going to force us to have deal with these capacity issues in a very big way. And then I think we have the social issues upon us, which I'm glad that they are, because they're going to force us all to do the right thing in terms of diversity and inclusion. And equity, and that's with subcontracting, it's with our own people, and doing the right thing. And so I think these issues are there, and we all have to work with together to solve them. There are no easy answers, but I think the industry is trying to do the right thing, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to work with young people coming into the industry who have great ideas, and they're going to challenge all of us to get to the right place. So thanks. I wish we had another couple hours to talk about these things. I get excited about talking about them, And thank you for the opportunity, Keith, and for your leadership with NAC and the Ask Me Anything. I think you're touching a lot of people in a great way to get some of us out there to speak our mind, and hopefully some of this has been useful. But I've enjoyed it, so thank you for the opportunity.
I've really enjoyed your thoughts and your experience. Thank you for sharing it. It's been wonderful, Bill, to talk with you. And I want to take a moment also to thank all of the members of the National Academy of Construction for donating their time and actually their resources that provide us the opportunity to give the scholarship and help you all through this. So it somewhat pains me to read this because I just saw our randomly selected student is from the University of Southern California who just beat my Colorado Buffaloes on Saturday pretty badly at home. But Yi Hang, congratulations from USC. You've won our scholarship today, and Sandra Pittman will be in touch with you via email to let you know how to get that. So for everyone else, I hope you join us next month. We'll be talking with Joe Brewer, and we'll be getting more into complex design and construction projects. So Bill, again, thank you for all your time.
Thank you all.